The mystery of abundance has puzzled humanity for centuries. We've searched the stars, consulted fortune tellers, analyzed market trends, and followed countless proven systems, all looking for that magical external signal that wealth is on its way. But what if we've been looking in entirely the wrong direction all this time? Have you ever noticed how some people seem to attract wealth effortlessly, while others struggle for years with little to show for their efforts? What if I told you that the difference between these two groups has nothing to do with luck, connections, or even how hard they work, but everything to do with certain invisible signs that appear before physical wealth manifests? Has this ever happened to you? You work tirelessly, follow all the conventional advice about saving, investing, and building multiple income streams. Yet abundance seems to remain just beyond your reach, like a mirage that disappears as you approach it. Meanwhile, someone else with seemingly less effort appears to manifest opportunities and resources with remarkable ease. The teachings of masters like Neville Goddard and Joseph Murphy reveal a profound truth that most people miss. The authentic signs of approaching wealth never appear first in your bank account, your business, or your external circumstances. They manifest in the invisible, in your consciousness, in that intimate space that only you can access. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the globe. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform your relationship with abundance. The awakened individual understands something that eludes the masses. While most people anxiously look outward asking, "When will it happen?" and seeking validation from the material world, the true creator looks within and declares with unwavering certainty, "It has already happened." This subtle shift represents the fundamental difference between the servant of matter and the master of creation. The common mindset begs the universe for evidence before believing, while the enlightened consciousness knows that belief must precede evidence, always. What makes this understanding so powerful is that it isn't merely philosophical, it's practical and demonstrable. Joseph Murphy explained that wealth emerges not as some external prize awarded to the lucky few, but as the natural, inevitable consequence of an inner state assumed with absolute conviction. When you change your state of consciousness, the entire universe must rearrange itself to match that inner reality. The uncomfortable truth that few prosperity teachers will tell you is that life doesn't respond to what you say you want, or even to all those vision boards you've created. It responds only to what you are in silence, to the consciousness you maintain when no one else is watching. This is why some individuals attract wealth with apparent ease, while others, despite years of hard work and determination, remain trapped in scarcity. The question then becomes, how do you recognize when this inner transformation has occurred? What are the subtle, almost imperceptible signs that indicate wealth has already been created in the invisible realm and is now moving toward physical manifestation? These signs are what separate those who merely wish for prosperity from those who command it into existence. If these insights about wealth manifestation resonated with you, hit the subscribe button to join our community of conscious creators. I share powerful revelations about prosperity, manifestation, and spiritual alignment that you won't find anywhere else. The first revelation that often transforms a seeker's journey is understanding that your prosperity isn't determined by external factors, but by the silent conversation you're having with the universe. This hidden truth has been veiled for centuries behind complexity, when in reality it operates with mathematical precision. The universe doesn't respond to your words, your hopes, or even your desperate prayers. It responds only to your state of being. Think about it for a moment. We've been conditioned to believe that wealth is something we chase, something we attain through relentless effort and sacrifice. But Emmett Fox revealed a paradigm shift that changes everything. It's your consciousness, not your physical actions, that creates your reality. Your external world is simply mirroring back to you the energy signature you're broadcasting in silence. This explains one of life's most perplexing mysteries, why some individuals seem blessed with an effortless flow of abundance, while others remain trapped in scarcity despite working twice as hard. It's not that the universe plays favorites. It's that it responds to different frequencies of consciousness with perfect fidelity. Those who appear lucky have simply, often unknowingly, aligned their inner state with abundance rather than lack. The impact of this understanding goes beyond mere philosophy. It completely redefines our approach to manifestation. Most of us have been taught that sweat and struggle are prerequisites for success. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor, believing that the harder the path, the more deserving we are of the reward. But what if this entire premise is backward? Neville Goddard challenged this deeply ingrained belief when he explained that physical exertion and struggle aren't the causes of prosperity, but merely reflections of a consciousness that believes effort is necessary. In other words, your struggle doesn't create your wealth. It reveals your beliefs about how wealth must be attained. This is the revelation that often goes unspoken in conversations about abundance. Consciousness itself is the only creative power in the universe. It is the source of all gold, all prosperity, and every transformation you've ever experienced. Your physical actions are simply the echo of your beliefs, the shadow cast by your consciousness as it moves through the world. When you truly grasp this principle, your approach to wealth creation undergoes a profound shift. Rather than frantically doing more, you begin focusing on being more, specifically being the embodiment of the prosperity you seek. This mindset revolution is not about denying action, but understanding that aligned action flows naturally from an aligned state of being. Think about the most prosperous people you know or have studied. Their secret isn't that they never take action. It's that their actions emerge from a consciousness already aligned with abundance. They move through the world as if wealth is their birthright, not a distant goal they're desperately pursuing. Their efforts feel different because they originate from a different inner landscape. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what happens in that critical moment when consciousness shifts from scarcity to abundance. There's a subtle, almost imperceptible instant when the invisible begins to announce what is about to become visible in your life. It's not a sign you can see with your physical eyes, but a movement you can feel in your soul. It occurs when fear gives way to calm certainty, when anxiety transforms into quiet confidence, when desperate desire becomes anticipated gratitude. In this moment, you stand at the threshold between worlds, between what is and what will be. And if you learn to recognize these inner signs, you'll understand why wealth never really comes to you. It emerges from you. If you've experienced this shift in consciousness before, even momentarily, write in the comments, "I've felt this shift." I'd love to know how it manifested in your life. The journey toward abundance reveals its first landmark when you notice a profound inner transformation that most people overlook. It's that sacred moment when something shifts inside you, almost imperceptibly at first, but with a power that eventually reshapes your entire reality. This shift doesn't announce itself with trumpets or external validation. Instead, it whispers through a change in how you feel about your desires. Joseph Murphy described this pivotal moment with remarkable clarity. He identified It is that precise instant when anxiety about the future transforms into quiet certainty about what is coming. It's when your desire ceases to be a desperate plea born from lack and becomes instead a feeling of grateful anticipation, as if you're not asking for something new, but simply waiting for something already yours to arrive in its perfect timing. This revelation completely reframes our understanding of manifestation. Most seekers on this path spend years looking for external signs. A certain amount in their bank account, a particular opportunity, or validation from others. But the truth is far more intimate. The authentic sign manifests in your emotional landscape first, in that sacred territory where only you can witness the transformation. It's like watching a barometer before a weather change. Something in your being registers the shift before any cloud appears in the sky. You might still be in the same circumstances externally, yet internally something fundamental has changed. The fear that once accompanied thoughts of your financial future dissolves into a calm knowing. The compulsive checking of accounts or obsessing over how it will happen fades into peaceful trust. This mindset metamorphosis represents the invisible, announcing what will soon become visible. And once you learn to recognize this inner barometer, you'll never again doubt the process of creation. You'll understand that what appears as waiting for manifestation is actually just the necessary interval between the inner shift and its outer reflection. But here's where a second revelation deepens our understanding even further. Wealth does not come to you, it emerges from you. This distinction completely revolutionizes how we approach abundance. Emmett Fox taught that what appears as material wealth in your external world is merely the reflection of the spiritual gold that has awakened within you. Like a projector casting images onto a screen, your consciousness projects its content into your experience. The implications of this truth are profound. Most people operate as if prosperity is something external they must chase, capture, and then protect from loss. They exhaust themselves pursuing what they believe exists separate from them. But the awakened individual understands they don't chase prosperity, they emanate it. They become the source rather than the seeker. Think about the difference in energy between these two approaches. The person chasing wealth is constantly in a state of lack, reinforcing the very absence they're trying to overcome. Their actions emerge from fear, scarcity, and separation. But the person who understands they are the source operates from wholeness, confidence, and connection. Their actions flow from abundance that already exists within. This explains why identical strategies yield dramatically different results for different people. Two individuals might follow the same investment approach, business model, or wealth-building system, yet one thrives while the other struggles. The difference isn't in their external actions, but in the consciousness from which those actions spring. The true creator doesn't pursue abundance like something foreign to their nature. They simply allow the abundance that already exists within them to flow outward, recognizing that the outer world must eventually conform to the inner pattern. This perspective transforms not just results, but the entire experience of creating wealth. What's fascinating is how this principle manifests as a distinct feeling state in your being. When you've made this transition, financial concerns no longer trigger panic or obsession. Instead, they're met with a composed clarity that comes from knowing your true source of supply is never at risk. You become like a tree that doesn't fret about individual fruits because it understands its nature is to bear them. If this revelation resonates with something you've always sensed, but perhaps couldn't articulate, type source within in the comments. Now let's explore what happens when this understanding becomes so deeply integrated that it transforms how you relate to desire itself. The first tangible sign that announces approaching wealth appears in what seems like a paradox to most seekers. Neville Goddard identified this as a state of natural detachment, a profound shift in your relationship with money where scarcity suddenly loses its emotional grip on you. This transformation doesn't announce itself with fanfare, but emerges quietly in how you respond to your financial circumstances. What makes this revelation so counterintuitive is that it often appears just when conventional wisdom would have you increase your attachment and concern. While you may still not possess everything you desire materially, something inside you shifts. The desperation that once accompanied thoughts of money begins to dissipate. The emotional charge around your bank balance fades. The compulsive need to control every financial outcome relaxes its hold. And here's where the alchemy occurs. Precisely in this moment of apparent non-caring, when you've released the white-knuckled grip on your financial future, energy begins flowing in your direction. It's as if the universe has been waiting for you to stop blocking the very abundance you've been seeking through your anxious attachment to it. This phenomenon explains one of the most perplexing patterns observed in wealth creation. Have you ever noticed how opportunities often arrive when you've stopped frantically pursuing them? Or how the breakthrough finally comes after you've made peace with the possibility that it might not? This isn't mere coincidence, it's law in action. But there's a critical distinction that Joseph Murphy clarified, which prevents many from experiencing this state authentically. What appears as detachment isn't indifference or resignation. It's not about giving up on your desires or becoming apathetic about prosperity. Rather, it represents the highest form of spiritual mastery, freeing yourself from the belief that money is your master and determines your worth, happiness, or security. Don't miss the next revelation on your manifestation journey. Subscribe now and become part of a growing community dedicated to understanding the invisible laws that govern prosperity and abundance. The breakthrough insight here is understanding the difference between caring about money and being emotionally controlled by it. When money holds the power to dictate your emotional state, sending you into elation with its presence or despair with its absence, you've placed yourself in a subservient position. You've made money the master and yourself the servant. True detachment is the reclamation of power. It's the quiet recognition that while money serves valuable purposes in your life, it doesn't define your essence or determine your peace. This subtle mindset revolution reframes your entire relationship with abundance. Instead of chasing money as if it holds the key to your freedom, you recognize that freedom already exists within your consciousness, and from that freedom, prosperity naturally flows. This journey toward genuine detachment often involves facing your deepest fears about scarcity. Many avoid this territory, believing that maintaining anxiety somehow keeps them safe or motivated. But the transformative revelation comes when you realize that your fear of lack has been the very barrier preventing abundance from flowing. The desperate energy of needing money creates resistance that blocks its arrival. When your mind finally calms and your heart no longer vibrates with that desperate urgency, something remarkable happens. You naturally align with invisible abundance. It's like tuning a radio to the correct frequency. The broadcast was always there, but you couldn't receive it while tuned to the static of fear and attachment. What's fascinating is how this detachment manifests in practical behaviors. You'll notice yourself making financial decisions from a place of centered clarity rather than emotional reactivity. You'll find yourself less impressed by displays of wealth and more attuned to genuine value. Your purchasing decisions shift from status-seeking to meaning-creating, and perhaps most tellingly, financial setbacks that would have previously devastated you for days now move through your awareness without collapsing your sense of well-being. This state isn't something you can force or fake. Many try to manufacture detachment through affirmations or intellectual understanding, but authentic detachment emerges organically through the deepening of your spiritual awareness. It's the natural consequence of recognizing your true identity as a creator rather than a consumer of experience. As you embody this first sign of approaching wealth, you'll discover something surprising. The experience of abundance begins long before its physical manifestation. You start feeling wealthy before external circumstances reflect it, creating a resonance that accelerates its physical expression. If you've experienced moments of this liberating detachment where money lost its emotional power over you, write freedom in the comments. Let's continue by exploring what happens when this detachment deepens and transforms into something even more powerful, the silence of doubt. As your journey deepens, you encounter one of the most profound paradoxes in the manifestation process. Emmett Fox revealed this counterintuitive principle. The moment you stop frantically chasing what you perceive as missing from your life is precisely when the universe recognizes your readiness to receive it. This revelation transforms not just your approach to wealth, but your entire relationship with desire and fulfillment. Think about the hidden wisdom in this principle. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that getting what we want requires intense pursuit, more effort, more strategy, more pushing against resistance. We've internalized the narrative that abundance must be hunted down, captured, and secured through relentless action. But what if this very approach creates the resistance that blocks the natural flow? When you examine your own experience, you might notice a fascinating pattern. The things you've chased most desperately often remained elusive, while meaningful gifts sometimes arrived when you weren't looking for them at all. This isn't random coincidence, but evidence of a universal principle at work, a principle that operates with mathematical precision once you understand its mechanism. The breakthrough insight here is recognizing that your attachment to outcomes creates a vibrational resistance that actually repels what you seek. As long as attachment persists, fear exists. Where fear exists, your energy field creates a barrier that abundance cannot penetrate. It's like trying to catch water by clenching your fist tightly. The very action designed to capture actually prevents reception. Your desperate pursuit signals to the universe that you're operating from a consciousness of lack, a belief that what you need is absent and must be acquired through struggle. But the universe doesn't respond to your actions nearly as much as it responds to the consciousness behind those actions. When that consciousness vibrates with neediness and insecurity, it creates an energetic mismatch with the abundant nature of universal supply. What appears as a spiritual revelation is actually practical quantum physics. Your consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it participates in creating it. When you release the anxious grip of attachment and allow yourself to rest in the awareness that all is well, something shifts at the subatomic level of creation. The universe perceives this shift as readiness, a signal that you've finally aligned with the flow rather than resisting it. This brings us to another dimension of detachment that Neville Goddard illuminated with remarkable clarity. True detachment isn't about giving up on your desires or becoming passively resigned to whatever comes. It represents the highest form of faith, surrendering to the absolute certainty that the invisible realm has already provided everything you need, even before you asked. This perspective completely reframes what surrender means in the context of manifestation. We often associate surrender with defeat or settling for less. But authentic spiritual surrender is actually an awakening to more. It's the recognition that you don't need to strain and struggle to create what already exists in completed form within the invisible dimension of consciousness. When you surrender in this way, you're not abdicating responsibility or becoming passive. You're actually stepping into a higher form of creative power, one that works with universal law rather than against it. You're acknowledging that the divine order operates with perfect timing and infinite intelligence, arranging circumstances far more effectively than your limited perception ever could. This deep trust creates the optimal conditions for manifestation. Think of it like planting a seed. Once placed in fertile soil, the seed doesn't require your anxious hovering or constant digging to check its progress. In fact, such interference would likely prevent its growth. What the seed requires is your trust in the natural process, providing the right conditions, and then allowing the inherent intelligence within the seed to unfold according to its nature. Your consciousness works in much the same way. When you plant the seed of intention and then surrender with deep trust, you allow the manifestation process to unfold without the interference of doubt and fear. You create space for universal intelligence to arrange people, circumstances, and opportunities in ways your limited perspective could never orchestrate. If you've experienced the freedom and empower that comes from this kind of surrender, when you stopped fighting and simply trusted in perfect timing, write divine timing in the comments. Now let's explore what happens when life begins presenting you with apparent setbacks and delays that are actually preparing the way for greater abundance. One of the most transformative revelations on the path to prosperity comes when you begin to recognize the hidden purpose behind life's apparent setbacks. Those unexpected changes, delays, financial losses, and seeming injustices that you've likely interpreted as obstacles are actually serving a profound function in your journey toward abundance. Joseph Murphy illuminated this principle by explaining that these challenges aren't random misfortunes, but the invisible hand of universal law, teaching you perhaps the most valuable lesson in wealth creation: to release your dependence on external conditions. Think about your own experience with adversity. Perhaps you've lost a job you thought was secure, watched an investment fail, or had an opportunity dissolve just when it seemed certain. In those moments, the natural human tendency is to interpret these events as evidence that the universe is working against you or that prosperity is unreliable. But what if the exact opposite were true? What if these very experiences were orchestrating your liberation from the greatest barrier to sustainable wealth, dependency on external circumstances? This perspective creates a profound mindset revolution. Instead of seeing setbacks as punishment or bad luck, you recognize them as initiations, sacred thresholds guiding you toward the understanding that true abundance emerges from within. Each challenge becomes an invitation to shift your point of power from the external world to your own consciousness. The breakthrough moment arrives when you realize that every external collapse is actually clearing space for a more authentic foundation. When your financial security depends entirely on a particular job, relationship, or market condition, you've built your house on shifting sand. True security can only be established when you recognize that the source of your supply is not the channel through which it currently flows. This brings us to the second revelation that completely transforms your relationship with money. Emmett Fox articulated this principle with remarkable clarity. As long as you believe money comes exclusively from people, jobs, or opportunities, it will continue to elude you. But once you grasp that wealth flows from the consciousness you maintain, life begins serving you silently and effortlessly. This understanding represents nothing less than total economic freedom. Most people operate under the illusion that money comes from a limited set of external sources: their employer, their clients, their investments, or perhaps an inheritance. They focus all their energy on securing and controlling these channels, living in constant anxiety that the flow might be disrupted. But the liberated individual understands that these are merely channels, not sources. The true source is the infinite creative potential of consciousness itself, which can express through limitless channels. When one door closes, infinite others can open, not by desperate seeking, but by maintaining the consciousness of abundance regardless of appearances. This revelation doesn't mean you ignore practical action or financial intelligence. Rather, it infuses your actions with a different quality of energy. Instead of operating from fear and scarcity, desperately trying to control outcomes and protect yourself from loss, you move from centered awareness of your connection to infinite supply. Your decisions become expressions of abundance rather than reactions to scarcity. When you embody this understanding, money begins moving toward you with remarkable ease, like a river finding its natural course. The channels may change, perhaps a new career opportunity, an unexpected business idea, or a perfectly timed investment, but the flow itself becomes increasingly reliable. You discover that prosperity doesn't require exhausting effort, but simply aligning with its natural movement. What's fascinating is how this principle manifests in practical behavior. You'll notice yourself becoming more generous, knowing that circulation increases flow rather than diminishes it. You'll make decisions based on value and growth rather than fear and protection. You'll recognize opportunities that would have been invisible to your previous consciousness. And perhaps most importantly, you'll maintain inner stability regardless of temporary external fluctuations. This understanding creates a virtuous cycle. As you release dependence on external conditions, your consciousness expands. As your consciousness expands, more channels of abundance open to you. As more channels open, your trust in the process deepens. As your trust deepens, your consciousness expands. Further, this upward spiral continues, creating increasing freedom and prosperity. If you've noticed this principle beginning to operate in your own life, where what initially seemed like a setback actually cleared the way for greater abundance, share your experience with the word redirection in the comments. Now let's explore what happens when this understanding deepens to the point where anxiety, comparison, and the need to prove yourself finally dissolve. The path to true prosperity undergoes a profound evolution when you experience what might be called a spiritual death and rebirth. Neville Goddard described this transformation with remarkable precision as the death of the old self who begs and pleads, replaced by the new self who commands with quiet authority. This inner metamorphosis marks the definitive transition from spiritual beggar to authentic creator. This shift represents much more than a simple mindset change. It's a complete identity transformation that revolutionizes how you interact with the universe. The old self operates from a consciousness of unworthiness, constantly seeking validation and permission to prosper. This self anxiously compares its progress to others, worries about being judged, and feels compelled to prove its value through external achievements and possessions. But no substantial wealth can manifest while this self-image remains intact. The universe simply responds to who you believe yourself to be. If you perceive yourself as small, limited, and dependent on external approval, the world will mirror that perception back to you in the form of restricted opportunities and conditional prosperity that never quite satisfies. The awakening begins when you recognize how exhausting this pattern has become. There's a moment of profound liberation when you realize that no amount of external validation will ever fill the void created by self-doubt. No achievement will silence the inner critic permanently. No possession will heal the wound of feeling fundamentally inadequate. This recognition creates the space for authentic transformation. The compulsion to prove your worth through acquisition gradually dissolves. The desperate need for others to acknowledge your success loses its grip. The anxiety about whether you're doing enough, being enough, or having enough begins to fade. In their place emerges something revolutionary, the quiet dignity of one who knows their inherent value beyond all external measures. When this inner death and rebirth occurs, you no longer approach abundance as a supplicant hoping to be chosen. You stand as a conscious creator, aligned with the very source of prosperity itself. Your words carry new power because they emerge from conviction rather than need. Your actions generate different results because they flow from centeredness rather than desperation. Your very presence emanates an authority that doesn't demand attention but naturally commands respect. This transformation creates the conditions for the second sign that wealth is approaching, the silence of doubt. Joseph Murphy identified this as the mystical moment when your previously chattering mind begins to quiet down. It's as if the internal committee of worriers, critics, and fearmongers that once dominated your mental landscape gradually loses its audience and influence. The experience of this mental silence is unmistakable once you've felt it. The inner dialogues of fear that once played on continuous loop. What if it doesn't work out? What if I'm not good enough? What if I lose everything? Begin to fade in volume and frequency. The insecurities about the future that once seemed so urgent and compelling start losing their grip on your attention. The compulsive need to control every detail and outcome gradually relaxes its hold. What's fascinating about this process is that the silence doesn't come from suppressing doubts or forcing positive thoughts. Such efforts typically create more inner tension, not less. The authentic silence emerges organically as you deepen into truth. It's the natural result of recognizing that the fears were never protecting you, they were only limiting your expression. This mental quietude creates space for a different quality of thought to emerge. Rather than the frantic circular thinking of worry, your mind begins operating with clarity and inspiration. Solutions appear with remarkable ease. Creativity flows without obstruction. Decisions become simpler and more direct. It's as if by releasing the mental static, you've tuned into a clearer frequency of consciousness. The world responds differently to this quiet mind. Opportunities that may have always been present but were obscured by mental noise suddenly become visible. People sense the shift in your energy and respond accordingly, often with increased trust and openness. Resources align more effortlessly with your intentions, not because you're trying harder, but because you're interfering less. This silence represents more than just psychological comfort. It signals a fundamental shift in your relationship with universal intelligence. When the mind quiets, you become more receptive to intuitive guidance, inspired ideas, and perfect timing. You move from pushing against life to flowing with it, from forcing outcomes to allowing them to unfold in their natural perfection. If you've experienced moments of this liberating mental silence, where the chattering of doubt suddenly gave way to calm clarity, share your experience with the words "inner quiet" in the comments. Now let's explore what happens when this silence deepens to the point where you begin listening to a different voice entirely. The voice of certainty that says, "It is already done." As the inner landscape quiets, a remarkable transformation occurs in what you choose to listen to within yourself. Emmett Fox described this pivotal shift with profound insight. He observed how you naturally begin to withdraw attention from the loud, insistent voice of impossibility, the one that has dominated your awareness for so long, and start attuning to another voice that's always been present but often drowned out by mental noise. This other voice speaks with quiet authority rather than desperate volume. It doesn't shout to be heard or demand your attention through fear. It simply states with unwavering certainty, "It is already done." While the voice of doubt speaks of struggle, limitation, and what cannot be accomplished, this voice speaks of completion, abundance, and what already exists in perfect form, awaiting your recognition. This transition represents a profound awakening to a different dimension of consciousness. It's the moment when you begin perceiving reality not just through the limited lens of physical senses, but through the expanded awareness of spiritual vision. You start recognizing that creation occurs first in consciousness before manifesting in form, that the physical world doesn't dictate what's possible, but merely reflects what's already been established in the invisible realm. What makes this shift so revolutionary is that it completely reverses the normal direction of human attention. Most people are trained to look at current circumstances for evidence of what's possible, allowing the existing condition to determine their beliefs about what can be created. But this awakened state inverts that process entirely. It recognizes that circumstances don't create beliefs. Beliefs create circumstances. This marks the precise moment when consciousness takes command and ego surrenders to universal law. The small self that once struggled to make things happen through force of will now yields to a higher intelligence that creates through alignment rather than effort. This surrender isn't defeat, but liberation. The relief of recognizing that you don't need to figure everything out or control every variable because a greater wisdom is already orchestrating perfect outcomes. The impact of this revelation extends far beyond mere psychological comfort. Neville Goddard illuminated how this shift transforms faith itself from abstract concept to tangible substance. While doubt dominates, faith remains just a nice idea, something you're trying to believe despite evidence to the contrary. It feels fragile, requiring constant reinforcement through affirmations and reminders. But when internal silence replaces doubt, faith undergoes an alchemical transformation. It's no longer something you're trying to generate or maintain. It becomes the very substance of your being, as natural as breathing and just as effortless. This creates a state of inner calm and confidence that requires no external validation because it recognizes manifestation as inevitable rather than merely possible. This unshakable confidence expresses itself in subtle but unmistakable ways. You'll notice yourself speaking differently about your desires, using the language of completion rather than hoping or wishing. You'll find yourself naturally making decisions that align with your vision being already fulfilled. You'll observe your emotional reactions, shifting from anxiety about outcomes to calm appreciation of the process. What's fascinating about this state is that it doesn't depend on external circumstances matching your desires yet. In fact, this inner certainty often emerges while conditions still appear contrary to what you're creating. The old paradigm would interpret this as delusion or denial, but the awakened consciousness recognizes it as the precise moment when transformation becomes inevitable. When the invisible pattern has been so clearly established that its physical manifestation is only a matter of time. This certainty creates an unusual relationship with time itself. Rather than anxiously waiting for something to happen in the future, you rest in the awareness that what you desire already exists in a dimension beyond time. What appears as waiting is actually just witnessing the process by which the invisible becomes visible, the unmanifest becomes manifest. This perspective removes the emotional charge from timing and creates patience that comes not from forcing yourself to wait, but from knowing the outcome is assured. The voice of certainty doesn't speak in grand proclamations or emotional intensity. Its hallmark is quiet, matter-of-fact assurance, the same tone you might use to state that the sun will rise tomorrow. There's no need to convince or persuade because you're simply acknowledging what is, rather than arguing for what might be. This quality of certainty carries tremendous creative power precisely because it doesn't strain or force. If you've experienced this profound shift where you began hearing and trusting the voice of certainty within you even before external evidence appeared, share your journey by writing "inner knowing" in the comments. Let's now explore how this inner certainty begins, transforming your experience of time and your relationship with the manifestation process itself. When you reach this stage of inner certainty, your entire relationship with time undergoes a profound transformation. Joseph Murphy revealed one of the most liberating perspectives on this journey when he explained that time is not what we've been conditioned to believe. It is simply the gap between spiritual creation and physical manifestation, the distance between the invisible and the visible. This revelation completely reframes the experience of waiting, which is often the most challenging aspect of the manifestation process. Most people interpret delays as evidence that something has gone wrong or that their desires aren't meant to be fulfilled. They experience time as resistance or obstruction, but the awakened consciousness recognizes time as simply the natural unfoldment process through which spiritual patterns translate into physical experience. This shift in perspective transforms impatience into fascinated appreciation of the creative process itself. What's particularly empowering about this understanding is the discovery that you can influence this gap between invisible and visible creation. Murphy observed that the deeper your inner peace, the more rapidly this bridge materializes. This explains why forcing and struggling often delay manifestation, while surrender and acceptance accelerate it. The very anxiety about when creates resistance that extends the very time frame you're concerned about. This insight creates a powerful catalyst for transformation. When knowing replaces wanting in your consciousness, when you shift from desperately seeking to calmly recognizing what already exists in spiritual form, reality begins responding differently to your presence. It's as if the universe recognizes this shift in vibration and begins rearranging circumstances to match your new frequency. The journey deepens as you begin embodying this understanding in practical ways. Emmett Fox described how the person who attains spiritual wealth no longer feels compelled to prove their prosperity through external validation or conspicuous consumption. They simply live with the quiet certainty of abundance, and this living certainty generates a magnetic force that draws everything matching this vibration into their experience. This state represents a complete reversal of conventional manifestation approaches. Rather than trying to get something you don't, have you recognize and express what you already possess in consciousness? Instead of asking, "How can I become wealthy?" you ask, "How would I live if I were already wealthy in spirit?" and begin living from that recognition immediately. What makes this approach so powerful is that it bypasses the usual struggle between current reality and desired outcome. When you live as if you already possess the essence of what you seek, you're not denying current appearances, but transcending them. You're operating from a deeper dimension of reality that eventually must express in visible form through the law of correspondence. The world responds to this state of being in ways that often defy rational explanation. Opportunities appear that perfectly match your needs. Resources arrive at precisely the right moment. People who resonate with your vision enter your experience as if guided by an invisible hand. Without logical explanation, the external world begins aligning with your inner state, confirming that consciousness is indeed the primary creative force. This alignment isn't magical thinking, but the operation of precise universal law. Just as a magnet doesn't strain to attract metal, but simply exerts its field by nature of what it is, the consciousness aligned with abundance doesn't need to force prosperity, but naturally draws it through resonance. This explains why identical actions produce dramatically different results, depending on the consciousness behind them. The revelation behind this principle is that prosperity was never something to be pursued or captured from outside yourself. It was always a frequency to be embodied and expressed from within. The person who grasps this truth undergoes a fundamental identity shift from consumer to creator, from one who needs to acquire to one who naturally emanates. This shift manifests in practical behavior changes that signal approaching wealth. You'll notice yourself making decisions based on value rather than fear. You'll find yourself genuinely celebrating others' success without comparison or envy. You'll observe yourself investing in growth rather than protection. And perhaps, most tellingly, you'll notice a natural generosity emerging not as sacrifice, but as joyful expression of your awareness of abundance. The creative power of this state comes precisely from its authenticity. You're not pretending to have what you don't, or using prosperity as a mask for insecurity. You're recognizing the truth that abundance is your spiritual inheritance, your natural state when artificial limitations are removed. This recognition carries an unmistakable vibration that the universe itself must echo back to you in material form. If you've noticed your relationship with time shifting from anxious waiting to peaceful certainty, where delays no longer disturb your confidence in the outcome, share your experience with the words "perfect timing" in the comments. Now let's explore what happens when this embodied certainty transforms the very nature of silence itself, turning it from empty absence into concentrated power. The journey toward wealth reveals one of its most counterintuitive principles when you discover the tremendous power hidden within silence. Neville Goddard illuminated this paradox with remarkable clarity when he observed that while the human mind associates activity with progress in the language of creation, the opposite is often true. We've been conditioned to believe that doing more, trying harder, and maintaining constant motion represents power and effectiveness. But in the realm of manifestation, excessive movement often indicates resistance, while silence signifies genuine power. This revelation completely transforms how you approach the creative process. Think about your own experience with manifestation efforts. Have you noticed how the desires pursued with the most frantic energy and desperate activity often remain elusive? Meanwhile, certain blessings arrive with remarkable ease when you've stopped straining to make them happen. This pattern isn't coincidental. It reveals a fundamental principle of universal law. The hidden truth is that anxiety-driven action disperses creative energy rather than concentrating it. When your mind races with worry about outcomes, strategies for forcing results, and contingency plans for potential failures, you're actually fragmenting your creative power across multiple timelines of possibility. None receives enough concentrated energy to manifest fully. It's like trying to illuminate an entire forest by waving a flashlight in every direction rather than focusing its beam on a single path. But when mental chatter finally ceases and you rest in the certainty of what is already created in consciousness, something remarkable happens. The energy previously wasted in fear, doubt, and excessive planning now concentrates into a single point of focused intention. This concentration creates a resonance so powerful that manifestation becomes not just possible, but inevitable. This silence isn't passive or empty, but vibrant with creative potential. It's the same quality of focused power you might observe in a master artist completely absorbed in their craft, a skilled athlete in a state of flow, or a seasoned meditator in deep communion with Source. Time seems to slow, peripheral distractions fade, and an unusual clarity emerges. In this state, you're not doing less, but accessing more, tapping into dimensions of creativity that remain inaccessible to the noisy mind. Joseph Murphy described the unusual tranquility that accompanies this state as a profound signal that a shift in creative power has occurred. When you notice this strange peace descending, a calm that might initially seem almost disconcerting in its completeness, it's as if the spirit is whispering, "Now it's my turn." This isn't your small self stepping back in defeat, but rather stepping aside in recognition that a higher, Intelligence can orchestrate outcomes with greater wisdom than your limited perspective ever could. This surrender represents the pinnacle of creative collaboration. You've done your part by clarifying intention and assuming the consciousness of fulfillment. Now you allow universal intelligence to handle the how, to arrange circumstances, inspire actions, and coordinate timing with a precision that your analytical mind could never achieve. The concentration of energy that occurs in this silence gives form to your new reality with an elegance that forced action never could. What makes this principle so transformative is that it completely reframes what many experience as the most challenging aspect of manifestation, the apparent period of nothing happening. Most interpret silence as absence, emptiness, or lack of progress. But the awakened consciousness recognizes it as the pregnant pause before birth, not empty at all, but filled with invisible activity, orchestrating perfect outcomes. This understanding transforms how you navigate the manifestation process. Instead of filling every moment with anxious activity and constant checking for results, you learn to rest in productive silence. Rather than interpreting quiet periods as evidence of failure, you recognize them as critical phases where the most powerful creation is occurring beneath the surface of visibility. The journey to embodying this principle often requires a fundamental reversal of conditioning. We've been taught that power means doing something, saying something, making something happen through force of will. The idea that genuine power might express through non-action, through listening rather than speaking, through allowing rather than forcing, this represents a revolutionary perspective that challenges our most basic assumptions about effectiveness. Yet those who master this principle discover that they accomplish more by doing less, receive more by demanding less, and create more by forcing less. They learn to distinguish between inspired action that flows from silent certainty and anxious activity that springs from fear and lack. The former carries creative power, while the latter often sabotages the very outcomes it seeks to ensure. If you've experienced moments when you finally stopped struggling and surrendered to this strange, peaceful silence, only to watch your desires manifest with unexpected ease, share your story with the words "sacred silence" in the comments. Now, let's explore how this state of inner silence creates the perfect conditions for the third sign of approaching wealth, the profound transformation of desire itself. The silence of mind creates the perfect conditions for experiencing the third sign that wealth is approaching, a profound transformation in the very nature of desire itself. Emmett Fox illuminated this metamorphosis with remarkable insight when he described how desire evolves from painful yearning based on absence into joyful anticipation based on spiritual possession. This shift represents one of the most significant thresholds on the path to manifestation. Most people experience desire as emotional suffering, a painful awareness of what's missing, a constant reminder of the gap between what is and what's wanted. This form of desire creates a peculiar torment. The very things we focus on most intensely often seem to remain just beyond our reach, creating an ongoing cycle of yearning and disappointment that can persist for years. But as consciousness awakens, desire undergoes an alchemical transformation. What once felt like the painful awareness of absence gradually evolves into something entirely different, a joyful anticipation based on inner knowing. The emotional signature shifts from the ache of separation to the pleasure of imminent reunion. This transmutation marks the precise moment when consciousness moves from begging to commanding, from pleading for what seems distant to claiming what already belongs to you. This revelation challenges everything we've been taught about the nature of wanting. Neville Goddard offered perhaps the most profound perspective on this misunderstood aspect of manifestation when he explained that authentic desire isn't the emotional suffering of absence, but the soul's quiet recognition of what already belongs to it in the spiritual dimension. In this framework, the desires that arise within you aren't random wants or conditioned cravings, but spiritual telegrams, messages about what already exists in completed form in the invisible realm. This understanding completely reframes the experience of desire. Rather than interpreting your desires as evidence of lack that must be filled, you recognize them as evidence of abundance that is seeking expression through you. Each authentic desire becomes not a problem to be solved, but a clue about what you're already aligned with at the soul level, what's already yours in the dimension of consciousness that precedes physical manifestation. When you feel this kind of transmuted desire, something profound has shifted in your relationship with manifestation. You've touched something already created in the invisible realm. Your desire no longer carries the desperate energy of, "I need this to be complete," but rather the magnetic recognition of, "This is already mine in consciousness, and I now welcome its expression in form." The experiential difference between untransmuted and transmuted desire is unmistakable. The former creates tension, anxiety, and the constant fear that what you want might never materialize. The latter creates relaxation, anticipation, and the quiet certainty that manifestation is simply a matter of divine timing. One drains your energy while the other enhances it. One separates you from what you seek, while the other connects you more deeply to it. This transformation reveals itself in subtle shifts in how you relate to your desires. You'll notice yourself speaking differently about what you want, using language that assumes possession rather than separation. You'll observe your emotional state changing from desperate longing to grateful expectation, and perhaps most tellingly, you'll find yourself feeling genuine enjoyment in the process of manifestation rather than just fixating on the outcome. What makes this shift so powerful is that it completely resolves the paradox that trips up most manifestors. Many spiritual teachings advise that you must let go of desires to fulfill them, while manifestation principles suggest you must focus intensely on what you want. This apparent contradiction dissolves when desire transmutes. You can simultaneously desire something deeply while being completely at peace with its timing and manifestation process. Attachment to the outcome disappears while connection to the essence strengthens. This transmutation doesn't diminish the intensity of desire, but rather purifies it of desperation and doubt. Your desires may actually grow stronger, but they no longer carry the painful emotional charge of need. They become more focused and clear, yet paradoxically held with greater lightness. This combination of intensity and detachment creates the perfect vibrational state for manifestation. You're energetically aligned with what you seek without creating resistance through anxious attachment. The process of desire transmutation often happens gradually as your consciousness evolves, but sometimes it occurs in sudden breakthrough moments. You might be contemplating a particular desire when something shifts and you suddenly feel it differently, as if you've crossed an invisible threshold from wanting into having. In that moment, you know something fundamental has changed, not in the external world, but in your relationship with the desire itself. If you've experienced this profound shift, where a desire transformed from painful yearning into joyful anticipation, where the emotional signature completely changed even before physical manifestation, share your revelation with the words "desire transformed" in the comments. Let's now explore what happens when this transmuted desire creates such a profound shift in your being that your wish begins to feel more like a memory than a dream. As this transformation of desire deepens, you begin experiencing one of the most fascinating revelations on the manifestation journey. Joseph Murphy described this phenomenon with remarkable precision when he observed that transmuted desire brings a unique feeling. Your wish no longer seems like a fantasy projected into the future, but more like a memory you're simply recalling from the past. This subtle yet profound shift in perception indicates that consciousness has fully accepted your desire as already completed, rather than as something still being pursued. This revelation brings a completely different quality to your manifestation experience. Think about how differently you relate to something you're imagining versus something you're remembering. When you imagine a future event, there's often an element of uncertainty, a question of, will this really happen? But when you remember something, there's an unshakable certainty. You don't question whether it occurred because you know it did. This same quality of certainty begins infusing your relationship with desires that haven't yet manifested physically. The journey to this state reveals why many people struggle with techniques like visualization, despite practicing diligently. They're approaching visualization as a form of imagining, creating mental pictures of what they hope might someday happen. But effective visualization has much more in common with remembering than with imagining. It carries that same quality of unquestioned certainty, that same feeling of course this happened, rather than I hope this will happen. When your consciousness fully aligns with this state, you experience a remarkable phenomenon. The emotional fulfillment of your desire arrives before its physical manifestation. You begin feeling the satisfaction, gratitude, and completion that would naturally accompany having already received what you desire. This isn't pretending or affirmation, but a genuine emotional experience that arises spontaneously from the recognition that in consciousness your desire is already fulfilled. This profound shift fundamentally transforms how you relate to the manifestation process itself. Emmett Fox illuminated another dimension of this transformation when he explained the difference between misunderstood desire and transmuted desire. The ordinary person believes that constant thought about their desires proves dedication and increases manifestation power. They feel compelled to continuously focus on what they want, to visualize repeatedly, to affirm constantly, as if the intensity of their mental activity determines the likelihood of fulfillment. But Fox revealed that transmuted desire operates according to entirely different principles. It needs no such proof of dedication or constant mental reinforcement. It rests in quiet certainty, like a seed already planted in fertile soil, requiring no anxious checking or digging up to verify its growth. This relaxed confidence actually accelerates manifestation rather than hindering it, creating the perfect conditions for desire to unfold according to its nature. This revelation explains why many people actually delay their manifestations through excessive effort. The constant checking, worrying, and mental rehearsing that seems like dedicated focus is actually a form of doubt in disguise. It's like planting a seed and then digging it up every day to see if it's growing. The very activity intended to help actually interferes with the natural process. The transformed relationship with desire creates a paradoxical experience that might initially seem confusing. On one hand, your desire feels more real and certain than ever before. On the other hand, you think about it less frequently and with less emotional intensity. This combination of increased certainty with decreased obsession represents the perfect state for manifestation, complete alignment without resistance. You'll notice this shift expressing in practical ways. Rather than constantly talking about what you want, you find yourself naturally preparing for its arrival. Instead of seeking reassurance through excessive research or planning, you take inspired action with calm confidence. Rather than needing others to validate your vision, you move forward with quiet certainty regardless of external opinions. What makes this state so powerful is that it closes the energetic loop of creation. Most people remain caught in an open circuit, constantly sending out the energy of wanting without ever completing the cycle through receiving. But when desire transmutes and you begin experiencing your wish as memory rather than fantasy, you close the circuit. The energy flows in a complete cycle of creation rather than dissipating through open-ended wanting. This revelation transforms not just your manifestation results, but your entire experience of the creative process. Instead of the frustration and anxiety that often accompany untransmuted desire, you experience peace and enjoyment regardless of timing. The journey itself becomes fulfilling rather than merely the means to an end. This shift in experience represents one of the clearest signs that your consciousness has aligned with abundance, and that physical manifestation must inevitably follow. If you've experienced this fascinating shift, where your desires began feeling more like memories than fantasies, where the emotional quality changed from anxious uncertainty to quiet recognition, share your experience with the words "living memory" in the comments. Now let's explore how this transformed desire naturally evolves into something even more powerful, a state of anticipated gratitude that becomes the magnetic force, drawing your desires into physical form. As your relationship with desire continues to transform, you begin experiencing what Neville Goddard identified as the distinct emotional signature of authentic creative power. True desire carries with it a completely different feeling than what most people associate with wanting. Rather than desperate grasping or anxious longing, it manifests as joyful anticipation. The same quality you might feel when preparing for the arrival of a beloved friend whose visit is absolutely certain. This state represents a complete revolution in how you experience unfulfilled desires. Instead of the tension, anxiety, and desperate focus on how and when that characterize conventional wanting, you feel a peaceful certainty of inevitable fulfillment. It's as if something within you simply knows beyond all doubt that what you desire is already yours in essence and must eventually express in form. The revelation that transforms many seekers' journey is recognizing that this emotional signature isn't just a pleasant side effect of spiritual growth. It's actually the precise vibrational key that unlocks manifestation. The feeling itself is the creative force. When your emotional state shifts from desperate wanting to joyful anticipation, you've aligned with the exact frequency that allows your desire to flow into physical expression without resistance. This transformation reveals the hidden truth behind why some people manifest with remarkable ease while others struggle despite using identical techniques. The difference isn't in the methods, but in the consciousness behind them. Two people might use the same visualization, affirmation, or action steps, but one operates from anxious wanting while the other embodies joyful anticipation. The results will be as different as the emotional states themselves. Joseph Murphy illuminated another dimension of this transformation when he identified anticipatory gratitude as the definitive sign. That desire has transmuted to its creative form. When you can genuinely feel thankful for something still invisible to your physical senses, not as a technique or affirmation, but as an authentic emotional response, you've crossed the threshold into the dimension where manifestation begins. This anticipatory gratitude represents a profound shift in awareness. Most people believe they can only feel grateful after receiving something in physical form. But the awakened consciousness recognizes that genuine gratitude can precede physical manifestation because it responds to what spiritual vision already sees as completed in the invisible realm. This isn't pretense or positive thinking, but genuine appreciation flowing from expanded perception. The journey to this state often involves questioning your most basic assumptions about reality itself. We've been conditioned to believe that only what we can see, touch, and measure with physical senses is real, while everything else is merely imaginary or conceptual. But this transformation reveals that the invisible realm of consciousness is actually more fundamental, more causative, and in many ways more real than the physical world that emerges from it. When you begin experiencing authentic gratitude for what hasn't yet manifested physically, something remarkable happens to your creative process. The gap between invisible and visible creation begins to close rapidly. The very frequency of gratitude creates a magnetic field that draws circumstances, resources, and opportunities that match the object of your appreciation. What you're genuinely thankful for must inevitably manifest in form. It's universal law in action. This anticipatory gratitude creates a profound shift in your relationship with time and process. Instead of enduring the journey while fixated on the destination, you find yourself enjoying each step as part of the unfolding gift. The waiting period that once seemed like frustrating delay now becomes a sacred space of preparation and alignment. You recognize that perfect timing isn't about waiting for what you want, but about becoming ready to receive what's already yours. If you've experienced moments of genuine gratitude for something before it physically manifested, where you felt authentically thankful, not as a technique, but as a natural response to what you sensed was already completed in the invisible, share your journey by typing "grateful now" in the comments. Let's explore how this state of anticipatory gratitude becomes the invisible seed that begins germinating in darkness, preparing to emerge as visible manifestation. What most people miss in their manifestation journey is the profound truth that Emmett Fox illuminated. The true seed of creation always germinates in darkness, invisible to physical sight, before emerging into visible form. This revelation completely transforms how you relate to that critical phase where nothing seems to be happening externally, yet profound transformation is occurring beneath the surface of visibility. Most people abandon their creative processes during this germination phase, mistaking the absence of visible evidence for failure. They plant the seed of intention, but then become discouraged when immediate physical confirmation doesn't appear. This misinterpretation leads to the heartbreaking pattern of giving up just before breakthrough, like a farmer abandoning a field the day before the first sprouts would have emerged from the soil. But when you understand the natural sequence of creation, invisible first, then visible, you develop a completely different relationship with this germination phase. Rather than experiencing it as frustrating delay or evidence of failure, you recognize it as the essential incubation period where the most important work is happening, though hidden from physical sight. This perspective allows you to maintain the perfect creative state, anticipated gratitude for what is already growing, though not yet visible. What makes this understanding so powerful is that it completely transforms your experience of the manifestation process. Instead of the anxiety, doubt, and constant checking that characterize most people's approach, you move through this phase with confidence and trust. You understand that just as a physical seed requires time in darkness before breaking through the soil, your consciousness seed requires time in the invisible realm before breaking through into physical form. When you maintain this feeling of anticipated gratitude during the germination phase, something remarkable begins to happen. The physical world gradually starts conforming to the pattern established in consciousness. It's as if reality itself begins bending toward what you've already accepted as completed in the invisible realm. The right people appear in your life at the perfect time. Inspired ideas arrive precisely when needed. Resources become available that perfectly match your requirements. None of this happens through desperate pursuit, but through magnetic attraction, to the consciousness you maintain. Neville Goddard identified the precise threshold that marks this transition, the moment when desire transforms from desperate need into calm certainty. This subtle yet profound shift represents crossing the boundary from wanting into having, from seeking to finding, from pursuing to possessing. It's the moment when you stop trying to get wealth and start embodying the consciousness that naturally attracts it. This transition represents the quantum leap in manifestation. At this point, wealth isn't something that might come in the future if you're lucky or if you work hard enough. It has already begun materializing, drawn by the irresistible magnetic force of a consciousness that has aligned with abundance. The physical manifestation is now simply a matter of divine timing, the necessary interval for the invisible to become visible according to the perfect pattern already established. The revelation that transforms seekers into finders is recognizing that this shift doesn't require any external condition to change first. It's an internal decision, a choice to stand firmly in the consciousness of having rather than wanting, regardless of what current circumstances might suggest. This decision doesn't deny current reality, but transcends it, operating from a dimension of consciousness where time is not linear and creation is already complete. What makes this understanding so liberating is that it completely releases you from the exhausting struggle of trying to make things happen through force of will. You recognize that the manifestation process isn't about using your mind to overcome reality, but about allowing your expanded consciousness to express as new reality. It's not about fighting against what is, but about standing firmly in what is becoming. If you've experienced this profound shift where you suddenly knew, beyond all doubt, that what you desired was already yours in essence, where you crossed that invisible threshold from wanting to having before any external evidence appeared, share your breakthrough moment with the words "threshold crossed" in the comments. Now, let's explore what happens when this inner certainty begins manifesting as the fourth sign of approaching wealth, the mysterious reorganization of external circumstances. As your consciousness firmly establishes itself in the state of having rather than wanting, you begin noticing something remarkable happening in your external world. Joseph Murphy identified this as the fourth sign that wealth is approaching, the invisible movement of circumstances. It manifests as life seemingly reorganizing itself without your conscious effort or planning. This phase of the manifestation journey often creates the greatest confusion because it rarely appears as you might expect. Instead of your external reality immediately matching your desires, something much more profound occurs. People who resonated with your old state of consciousness begin drifting away without conflict or drama. Certain paths that once seemed promising suddenly close. Opportunities you were counting on mysteriously vanish. And initially, everything appears to be moving in the opposite direction from what you desire. The untrained mind immediately interprets these changes as evidence of failure. It seems as if your manifestation efforts are backfiring, creating more distance from your goals rather than bringing them closer. This is precisely where most people abandon their journey, convinced that the process isn't working or that they're doing something wrong. But this interpretation misses the profound reorganization occurring beneath the surface. Emmett Fox offered a revolutionary perspective on this phase when he explained that what appears as confusion is actually the precise rearrangement of divine order. What looks like breakdown is actually breakthrough in disguise. The cosmos is methodically preparing the ground by removing elements that no longer align with your new state of consciousness and clearing space for what perfectly matches the prosperity you've assumed internally. This revelation completely transforms how you experience this critical phase of manifestation. Instead of resistance and disappointment, you develop fascination and trust. You recognize that the universal intelligence is operating with perfect precision, orchestrating circumstances far more effectively than your limited perspective ever could. The apparent chaos is actually a higher order emerging, one that perfectly corresponds to the state of consciousness you now embody. Think about what happens when you renovate a home. Before the beautiful new space can emerge, there's typically a phase of demolition that appears destructive. Walls are torn down, fixtures removed, surfaces stripped bare. If someone walked in during this phase without understanding the larger process, they might think something terrible was happening. But those who understand renovation recognize this apparent destruction as essential preparation for the new creation about to emerge. Your consciousness undergoes a similar renovation process. As you establish yourself firmly in a new state, the universe begins removing everything that vibrated with your old frequency. Relationships, opportunities, and circumstances that matched your previous consciousness must either transform or depart to make room for what resonates with your new state. This isn't punishment or failure, but the perfect mechanics of manifestation at work. What makes this phase particularly challenging is that it often unfolds in ways your logical mind couldn't have predicted or planned. The pathways to your manifestation rarely appear as you might have imagined them. The universal intelligence orchestrates circumstances according to a higher wisdom that sees connections and possibilities invisible to your limited perspective. This explains why forced manifestation efforts often fail, while surrendered creation succeeds. When you try to control exactly how your desires should manifest, you're actually limiting the infinite possibilities to the few your mind can conceive. But when you trust the reorganization process, you allow universal intelligence to arrange circumstances through countless channels your mind could never have imagined. If you've noticed your life mysteriously reorganizing itself, with certain people, opportunities, or circumstances falling away just before new, more aligned ones appeared, share your experience with the words "divine reorganization" in the comments. Now, let's explore how this reorganization process extends beyond your immediate circumstances to create an entirely new reality structure aligned with your assumed state of prosperity. As this reorganization process deepens, you begin witnessing what Neville Goddard described as the inevitable response of the external world to your transformed consciousness. When you genuinely sustain the state of wealth internally, reality has no choice but to reconfigure itself accordingly. This isn't wishful thinking, but the operation of universal law, the principle that your external world must eventually conform to the pattern established in consciousness. This reconfiguration often manifests in ways that initially seem unsettling. People who vibrate with scarcity consciousness, who constantly speak of limitation, struggle, and the way things are, naturally begin drifting away from your experience. This doesn't necessarily happen through conflict or dramatic endings, but through a quiet magnetic repulsion as your frequencies no longer resonate. Conversations become less engaging, connections feel less natural, and gradually these relationships either transform or dissolve. Simultaneously, situations that kept you confined to your previous state begin breaking apart. The job that limited your income but provided comfort through familiarity suddenly becomes unbearable. The living arrangement that kept you playing small no longer feels sustainable. The routines and habits that reinforced your old identity start feeling like a straitjacket rather than security. This dismantling process represents one of the most profound revelations about the manifestation journey. Before the new can fully emerge, the old must often crumble. Just as a butterfly cannot emerge while the caterpillar remains intact, your new prosperity consciousness cannot fully express while the structures aligned with limitation remain in place. This crumbling isn't punishment or failure, but the necessary clearing that creates space for your expanded state to manifest in form. Joseph Murphy observed that this transitional phase causes more people to abandon their manifestation journey than any other stage. When familiar structures begin dissolving and comfortable relationships start drifting away, the logical mind immediately interprets these changes as evidence that nothing is working. The very shifts that signal imminent breakthrough are mistaken for failure, causing many to revert to their previous consciousness just before their desires would have manifested. This revelation completely transforms how you navigate this critical phase. Instead of resisting the dissolution process or trying to cling to what's falling away, you recognize these changes as confirmation that your consciousness shift has registered in the universe. The dismantling isn't happening to you, but for you, clearing away everything that would prevent the full expression of your new state. What appears as chaos to the untrained eye is actually the birth process of new reality. Think about the moment before any significant birth, whether a child entering the world, a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, or a seed breaking through soil. This moment often appears as disruption, struggle, or breakdown. But this appearance is deceptive. What looks like destruction is actually creation in its most potent phase. When you understand this principle, you develop an entirely different relationship with change itself. Instead of interpreting disruption as evidence that manifestation has failed, you recognize it as confirmation that the universe is actively responding to your consciousness shift. The very things you might once have resisted, relationship changes, career transitions, location moves, become welcome signs that the invisible is becoming visible. This perspective creates a profound transformation in how you experience the manifestation journey. Instead of anxiety about what's dissolving, you feel excitement about what's emerging. Rather than resisting necessary endings, you welcome them as the essential prelude to new beginnings. The uncertainty that once felt threatening now feels like the sacred space where infinite possibilities exist before crystallizing into form. If you've experienced this profound reorganization, where relationships, situations, or circumstances aligned with your old state began falling away, and you recognized it as necessary preparation for your new reality, share your insight with the words "creative destruction" in the comments. Now let's explore how this reorganization process operates according to precise universal law, orchestrating elements you could never arrange through conscious planning. As this phase of reorganization deepens, you begin witnessing what Emmett Fox described as the invisible realm, actively orchestrating perfect conditions for your manifestation. What most people miss about this process is that it operates with mathematical precision rather than random chance. Once you've established a new state of consciousness, the universe begins attracting people, circumstances, and events that vibrate at exactly the same frequency as your internal state. This revelation completely transforms how you interpret what's happening around you. The cosmic forces aren't randomly responding to your wishes or requests. They're precisely conforming to the pattern you've established in consciousness. Matter, ever obedient to mind, has no choice but to bow before your internal state. This isn't mystical thinking, but the universal principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as within, so without, operating with flawless accuracy. What makes this understanding so empowering is that it removes all sense of helplessness or dependency on external forces. You recognize that the very substance of reality is responsive to consciousness, not occasionally or unpredictably, but consistently and precisely. Your inner world isn't just influencing your outer world, it's actually creating it according to its exact pattern, with no element left to chance. Neville Goddard illuminated another dimension of this process when he explained that the moment you genuinely assume a new state, Energy begins propagating in countless directions, invisible to your conscious awareness. This propagation creates ripple effects that orchestrate circumstances far beyond what your limited perspective could arrange. The casual encounter with a stranger who happens to mention exactly the opportunity you need. The random book that falls open to precisely the page containing your answer. The seemingly trivial conversation that leads to a life-changing connection. What appears as coincidence to the untrained eye is actually universal law in perfect operation. None of these encounters is random or accidental. Each represents a piece of the same divine design, the invisible made visible through perfect correspondence. Every detail, no matter how seemingly insignificant, is part of the same pattern emerging from your consciousness. This understanding transforms how you navigate daily life during this phase. Instead of dismissing subtle synchronicities or coincidences as meaningless, you recognize them as breadcrumbs on the manifestation path, confirmation that the invisible reorganization is actively unfolding. You develop a heightened awareness of these subtle signals, recognizing them as communication from the universe, confirming that your consciousness shift has registered and manifestation is in process. The revelation that changes everything is realizing that these synchronicities aren't rewards for good behavior or random blessings, but the natural consequence of your consciousness alignment. They appear not because you've earned them or because some external force has chosen to help you, but because they must. They're the inevitable expression of the state you're maintaining internally. This perspective creates a profound shift in how you engage with the manifestation process. Instead of anxiously forcing outcomes or trying to make things happen through sheer will, you become a fascinated observer of the unfolding pattern. You recognize that your primary creative work has already been accomplished in consciousness. Now you're simply witnessing how the invisible becomes visible through divine orchestration, far more elegant than anything you could consciously arrange. The practical impact of this understanding is that you become exponentially more receptive to inspiration, guidance, and opportunity. Rather than fixating on your preconceived notions of how prosperity should arrive, you remain open to countless channels through which abundance can flow. You recognize that the midnight inspiration, the chance meeting, or the unexpected offer might be the very pathway the universe has orchestrated for your desire to manifest. If you've experienced this fascinating phenomenon, where seemingly random encounters or coincidences turned out to be perfectly orchestrated steps toward your manifestation, share your story with the words "divine orchestration" in the comments. Now, let's explore how this principle of correspondence creates the conditions for wealth to enter your life, not through luck or chance, but through perfect alignment. One of the most empowering revelations on this journey comes when you truly understand what Joseph Murphy emphasized about the nature of prosperity. Wealth doesn't enter your life through random luck, fortunate circumstances, or even hard work alone. It arrives through precise alignment with universal law. This understanding completely transforms how you navigate the manifestation process, especially during times of significant change. When circumstances begin shifting around you, relationships transforming, opportunities appearing and disappearing, unexpected challenges arising, the untrained response is typically resistance or anxiety. The logical mind interprets change as threat and immediately attempts to restore familiar patterns, even if those patterns were aligned with limitation rather than abundance. This instinctive resistance to change represents one of the most common ways people unknowingly sabotage their manifestations. Just as they're about to materialize, the awakened response is radically different. When the winds of change begin blowing through your life, you remain calm and centered, recognizing these shifts not as random chaos, but as the invisible operating with mathematical precision. You understand that these changes aren't happening to you, but for you, orchestrating perfect conditions for your consciousness to express in form. This perspective allows you to collaborate with the reorganization process rather than fighting against it. What makes this journey so counterintuitive is the revelation Emmett Fox shared about the true sign of approaching abundance. Most people expect prosperity to announce itself through stability and security, through everything finally settling into comfortable patterns. But the opposite is usually true. The clearest indication that wealth is approaching is movement rather than stillness, transformation rather than preservation, the shifting of winds rather than calm. Seas. This perspective creates a profound paradigm shift. When everything around you begins moving, when relationships transform, locations change, career paths pivot, these aren't warning signs to retreat, but confirmation that the invisible is becoming visible. The spiritual gold that was created in consciousness is now emerging into form, and this emergence naturally disrupts whatever doesn't align with your new state. Think of it like the natural process of a river finding its path to the ocean. The water doesn't move in a perfectly straight line, but follows the path of least resistance, navigating around obstacles, sometimes appearing to move away from its destination before ultimately arriving there. Your manifestation follows a similar intelligence, moving through channels you might never have anticipated, sometimes appearing to go in the wrong direction, yet always progressing toward perfect expression. What distinguishes masters of manifestation from novices is precisely this: relationship with timing and process. Where the beginner panics at the first sign of disruption, the master remains centered in unwavering faith. They understand that the invisible operates with flawless timing. It's human impatience that interrupts the process. By attempting to force outcomes or restore comfortable patterns, we often delay the very manifestations we're trying to accelerate. This revelation transforms how you experience the manifestation journey. Instead of anxiously micromanaging every detail and interpreting each change as either success or failure, you develop a profound trust in the process itself. You recognize that the universe possesses an intelligence far beyond your limited perspective, one that can coordinate countless variables you could never consciously manage. The spiritual gold that emerges from this realm of consciousness doesn't announce itself with fanfare and dramatic displays. It arrives in silence, but manifests with power, like the seed, breaking through soil after its invisible germination. Your prosperity emerges not through magic or miracle, but through the natural expression of what was already created in consciousness. If you've noticed this fascinating pattern, where prosperity seemed to arrive not through stability, but through periods of significant change and transformation, share your journey with the words "prosperity in motion" in the comments. Now let's explore the fifth and perhaps most profound sign that appears before wealth, the moment of complete surrender, when you finally stop fighting the process and allow the invisible to manifest with perfect precision. The journey toward wealth culminates in what Neville Goddard identified as the fifth and perhaps most profound sign before physical abundance manifests, the moment of complete surrender. This isn't the surrender of defeat or resignation, but the sacred surrender of profound trust. It arrives as that precise moment when you finally stop fighting, controlling, and trying to intellectually understand how your manifestation will occur. This surrender represents the pinnacle of spiritual maturity on the manifestation path. Your soul, having journeyed through attachment, doubt, desire, and transformation, finally reaches a point where it's simply tired of resistance. In this holy exhaustion, something remarkable happens. You naturally release into an unshakable certainty that everything you've desired already exists in the invisible realm, and must inevitably express in form according to divine timing. What makes this surrender so powerful is that it resolves the fundamental paradox that trips up most manifestors. Most people believe they must maintain constant vigilance over the process, calculating probabilities, planning contingencies, forcing outcomes, and constantly checking for evidence. This approach seems logical and responsible, but actually creates the primary resistance blocking manifestation. It's like trying to grow a garden by digging up the seeds every day to check their progress. Joseph Murphy revealed the revolutionary truth that the greatest obstacle to manifestation isn't the external world, but your own efforts to control it. This insight completely transforms how you engage with the creative process. Until this point, the mind has been busy trying to help, calculating, predicting, planning, figuring out how it will happen. But eventually, you reach the liberating realization that the primary barrier was never outside circumstances, but your own controlling interference. The ordinary person often dismisses this state as simply leaving it in God's hands, or letting go and letting God. But the conscious creator recognizes it as something far more profound, perfect alignment with universal law. You're not abdicating responsibility or becoming passive. You're actually stepping into your highest creative power by removing the only obstacle that ever truly blocked your good, your own limited thinking about how it must arrive. This surrender creates an unusual experience of peace that might initially seem disconcerting in its completeness. The anxious energy that once drove your manifestation efforts, the constant checking, worrying, and forcing, dissolves into a calm certainty unlike anything you've previously known. You no longer feel haste or fear or even the weight of waiting. It's as if everything has already been resolved because in truth, it has. The invisible realm has received your consciousness imprint and requires only the necessary time to manifest in form. Your surrender creates the perfect conditions for this manifestation because it removes all resistance from the equation. When a person truly rests in certainty, the material world has no choice but to conform to that inner state. This isn't magical thinking, but the operation of precise universal law. This surrender transforms your entire experience of the manifestation journey. The waiting period that once seemed like frustrating delay now becomes sacred space, the perfect interval between invisible cause and visible effect. You no longer need constant reassurance or evidence because something within you simply knows beyond all doubt. Your prayers shift from begging to receive to giving thanks for what spiritual vision already sees as completed. What many don't realize about this state is that it isn't something you can force or pretend. Many try to manufacture surrender through affirmations or intellectual understanding, but authentic surrender emerges organically through the deepening of spiritual awareness. It arrives as the natural consequence of genuinely understanding that the invisible is more real and more powerful than the visible. That consciousness creates reality rather than merely observing it. If you've experienced this profound moment of surrender, when you finally stopped struggling to make things happen and simply rested in complete trust, that manifestation was inevitable. Share your journey with the words "divine surrender" in the comments. Now let's explore what happens in this sacred space of surrender, when the energy finally stabilizes and the universe begins to respond with unmistakable signs that manifestation is underway. As we approach the end of our journey together, I want to share something that's been on my heart. These signs before wealth manifests aren't just spiritual theory. They represent a profound truth about the creative power that already exists within you. When you recognize these signs in your own life, you're witnessing the invisible becoming visible, the spiritual becoming material, the seed of prosperity breaking through into physical expression. What's fascinating is how this understanding transforms not just your financial reality, but your entire relationship with creation itself. You begin recognizing that the same principles that manifest wealth apply to every area of life: relationships, health, purpose, joy. The awakened consciousness doesn't compartmentalize prosperity, but sees it as the natural expression of aligned being. If this message has resonated with you today, if something within you recognized these truths not as new information, but as remembrance of what you've always known at some level, I'd love to continue this conversation. Subscribing to this channel means joining a community of conscious creators who are learning to recognize and embody these principles together. Each video is designed to illuminate another facet of the manifestation journey, building on these foundational truths we've explored today. The greatest confirmation that you're aligning with these principles comes when you begin witnessing them operating in your own experience. If you've made it to the end of this exploration and feel that inner recognition, leave a comment with the words "Inner Creator Awakened." I read every comment and would love to hear which sign you're currently experiencing in your own journey. If you found value in these revelations today, a simple like on this video helps others on the same path discover these transformative truths. It's a small gesture that creates ripples of positive impact for fellow seekers. For those ready to go even deeper into this understanding, there's a video right here that explores what happens after these signs appear. When wealth begins flowing not as occasional blessing, but as consistent expression of your aligned state. Click and continue with me there as we explore the next phase of this remarkable journey of consciousness and creation.